Nope, you're still not. Hold on. I have it. I have it set on something. A sec. Should. All right, now we can see you.
Good morning. My name is Brandon Hurley. I'm the chairman of the Texas Low-Level Radioactive Waste Disposal Compact Commission. We are so thankful for each one of you that are here today and online. This is something that I hope we start to do very regularly. Public education is an important mission that we have, and we have not done as much of it in the past as we should have. So we are glad to do this today. I think it's going to be informative. I hope it starts a dialogue that continues even after the meeting. And we do plan on having these regularly once we get through. But we will also very much appreciate any input you can give us after this meeting is over on the things you want to hear about, the things that concern you, and the things that you think are important to the industry. Headline this morning that Governor Abbott announced last night that one of his legislative priorities is nuclear energy. So I think we are now living in the nuclear renaissance, and I think that's a wonderful thing, and it's good for our industry. It's good for all of us in here, and I think it's good for all of our citizens. So I think we are going to hopefully be a productive part of that process, and so I think things like this will help further the idea of nuclear energy and some of the important things that come with that, including the way we dispose of the waste that it creates. So we appreciate everyone being here. Good Lord willing, this is the only time you will hear from me today. And we will have an amazing list of speakers. We're going to start today with some of our other regulatory partners and operational partners. There is a representative from TCQ, WCS, and our DISHES, which is the Department of State Health Services. They will each provide us some presentation on their role in this process. Then after that, we will also have a presentation from some of our commissioners in the process that we use. And then at the end of each panel, we'll have time for a Q&A. So again, thank you all very much for being here today. And with that, we will turn it over to the first panel.
Do a little housekeeping real quick.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think I know what he's going to say. Restroom, all the way down to the left.
And please sign in if you're not. Please sign in on the sheet so you can get emails. We're going to get everybody the slide decks that you get today. If you give me your name and email address, I will email you all the slide decks later today. Brian, you're up first, I think.
Perfect. My name is Ryan Murdoch, West Control Specialist. So I did wake up this morning a little congested, so I'm going to try to breathe and talk at the same time. So bear with me there. So compact waste facility. So we'll discuss the facility in a minute, but the compact importation applies to a particular facility. Importation is under 31 tag 675.23. So all import applications must be publicly posted for a minimum of 35 days, but not more than 100 days in order to be heard. And then for a minor amendment, they need to be publicly posted for a minimum of 15 days prior to being heard at the event. So basically, about every other month, the Texas Compact Commission will meet and hear import agreements for original amendment, a major amendment, or a minor amendment. Those, like I said, those are held about every other month, and those are time frames that have to be posted to public before those can be heard. All the import applications should be posted electronically now, and the email address or the file is at the bottom of the screen. So that's our facility at WCS. So I'll kind of start with the Northwest category. So this is our low specific activity pad. It's where we do store non-hazardous waste, and where we do most of our remote handle rated hardware transfers. We got a gantry that sits up there. We're able to take up to about, I don't know, 20,000 R and remote handle it. We're down to, I believe, somewhere a little under 48 milligram total collected dose, which it looks like that. We started open air flying some up there. That dose is being the same span as the remote handle. Going down to byproduct facility, which is right below it. It's our 11E2 facility. It's licensed for basically 11E2 material. Right now, currently, it's only licensed for alt waste. As we move east of there, we've got our federal waste facility. It's a class A, B, and C low-level radioactive disposal facility. It's also permitted for RCRA and TSCA. Well, you can see right here in the lower hand corner, it will expand to the west as that cell opens up. To the east of that is our compact waste facility. So it houses class A, B, and C waste, non-hazardous. And this is what importation will apply. And then we move down to our RCRA Subtitle C facility. This is our RCRA Subtitle C facility. It also houses our LAW program. And then directly below that, you have all our administrative buildings, along with our nuclear waste treatment facility and a few storage pads. The road to the left, the LSA pad, is State Line Road. That is the road that separates the state of Texas and the state of New Mexico. Along with that, we've got about a 2.5 mile rail loop that goes around the site that goes into Eunice and attaches at Windmill Hill. And that's where we pick our rail up that it should be. Can't see it, but right down below where TSD facility and administrative buildings are, that is Highway 176. So I'm going to read these definitions, but these are some definitions that are important. So basically, we got a generator, a broker, and a small quantity generator. So a generator is one that basically a person who produces or manufactures some type of low-level waste through a process or a facility. A broker is a waste processor, a distributor, decontamination service, one that would get the material from a generator, compact it, process it, and then ship it to a disposal facility at a later time. And then a small quantity generator is a generator that's produced no more than 200 cubic feet and 100 curies in a year. It's not considered a nuclear power generation facility, electric facility, or anybody from the United States Department. So important aspects of the import agreement. So under Section J of the import agreement are all of our, what I'm going to call important, besides the language, important terms that you need attention to in the import agreement. So it talks about, Section A talks about the amount of waste in cubic feet you plan on importing in. Section B is the amount of curies that you plan on importing in. C is the place of origin, either the state or U.S. territory that the waste originated from that's being imported in. D is the waste description. Echo is waste classification, whether the class is A, B, or C. Foxtrot is waste form, and Golf is if any sealed sources are going to be imported in the generator. So, along with the contracts with TCQ, our customers have to follow. We also have to make sure that the importation is valid for acceptance at site. So we do that through a few different ways. So it's hard to see, but the one on the side is our Elite system. That's our online software tracking system. So once an import agreement gets posted to the TC website, we go on, validate, signatures are there, look at the numbers. Those then go into Elite, right? So they'll go in as, let's say the generator is, just say Crystal River. We'll put Crystal River in, we'll put the date of the application, the ending date of the fiscal year for the import year, the amount of volume, the amount of curies, and then we'll designate in there, are there any conditional removals or cure release letters that are given? We'll talk about those here in a few. And then on top of that, the one to the right is done by our inventory customer service. And at the shipment request level, same is verified there at a different phase by a different group to make sure that the waste coming in on the shipment approval has the proper authorization, has the proper volume, has the proper amount of curies, and any conditional removal letters or cure release letters that are needed are posted to that website. So we keep track of that two different ways. One, to a system that when you put in a shipment request, automatically applies to. And once again, at the shipment request level, once we're doing the approval, that we're meeting that required criteria. So WCS WAC in relation to import agreements. So the waste acceptance criteria is located in attachment C of our radioactive material license. Currently, we on R4100, amendment 40 of our license. Section 3 applies to limitations and prohibited waste. So any limitations, any waste that come in, or any prohibitions of any waste that are allowed to be accepted at the site at CWF or the FWF. Section 4 is the different types of waste streams. Section 5 goes over the generator certification audit process, which we're going to discuss here later in the slides. Section 6 is the waste classification, and then Section 7 is the waste characterization. So it goes over how waste should be classified and how waste should be characterized in accordance with federal regulation. And then Section 10 is the waste form and packaging requirements for the particular waste. And then Section 12 goes into transportation, and we'll discuss ditches and other forms of transportation here. So I do talk fast, I apologize if I'm going too fast, just tell me to slow down. All right, important aspects of the import agreement. So for generators and brokers, you can have stipulations and conditions under J that limit you to being able to ship until those conditions are met. One of those are a curie release letter. So if you're going to import in more than 15,000 curies in a given import year, you're going to have a curie release letter. The curie release letter needs to be sent to the Compact Commission usually about 15 days ahead of time, and limiting, basically, you're going to put in the letter when the shipment is going to occur, how many curies you plan on releasing at that point in time, and the shipment arrival date of WCS. So that goes into the compact, it gets approved, they'll send you an approval back, and that meets your condition in section J for the curie release. A lot of times, depending on how large a volume or how big a campaign you're doing, you might need an import for regular waste stream, DAW, steel sources, non-irradiated metal, stuff like that. And then you will need one for rated hardware. Usually you need to separate the two types of waste streams because the rated hardware will hold up other shipments if you don't separate that waste stream due to conditional release approval letters. Second is a conditional removal letter, and that is waste that's being exported out of certain compacts or territories in the year. What's come off the top of my mind would be the Northwest Compact, the Rocky Mountain Compact, Southwestern Compact. They all have export agreements. Those need to be finalized and ratified prior to the waste being imported into the state. So the overview of the waste process. So we'll talk about the initial customer contract without a contract, initial customer contract with an existing contract, generator certification program for their low oil facilities, waste profile approval, importation if it applies, waste shipment request approval, final paperwork verification, waste acceptance upon receipt at WCS by WCS as well as TCQ, and then it's rule first. So I'm going to skip the first one because that's existing contract. That contract. So usually business owner receives requested waste to ship through WCS website or through a customer contact. Business development works with site management, the technical service groups, develop pricing, contracts based on customers' needs. Then for CDBF waste, that waste is then submitted to the state for approval for a contract. Usually once that's submitted, that's done within about 5 business days. Then after that, the contract's approved and we move on to the customer with some more cleaning implementation. So depending on the particular type of stream that they're going through, there may be one importation, there may be 2 importations based on rated hardware or based off of steel, resin, filters, and stuff like that. Once that's complete, the customer, if they're not already in the system, they have got to fill out a program for DSHS for transportation. Basically, DSHS wants to know that when you put that material on the road, that you have programs, requirements, and procedures, and they're probably going to go into this a little more than I will, showing that you have the means to properly ship, transport, and respond to an emergency during an event that would occur on the road in Texas. After that's complete, we'll move on to waste profiling, shipper request submitted, goes along with getting waste to them. We'll go back. So basically, everything we talked about is all the same, except if you already have a contract, usually the DSHS stuff's done, the import agreement stuff done. So we'll go through basically customer submits the documents from waste profile shipper request. BD reviews the pricing, technical services, looks over the waste stream, make sure it's compliant with all our license procedure policies, permits and license. That's pushed through by the technical service manager. The waste acceptance does their sign offs along with the transportation coordinator, and then shipment is approved. Waste acceptance confirms that the import agreement is completed. Generator certification. So generator certification is required for shipments going to the CWF or the FW. And basically what we're doing is we're making sure the generator has a proper process to characterize their waste, making sure they have proper sampling procedures, regulatory compliance, the QA program meets our criteria. They know how to do container inspections, waste sampling and package requirements, waste shipper qualifications. So we'll go and make sure the training is up to date on all the waste shippers at the site. We want a copy of the ready control license to make sure it's current. A copy of relevant compliance history, then we'll look through external audits for NRC or any other external audits to make sure that there's no fines or they haven't done anything outside the regular status in the last few years. Once all that gets composed, we send our QA director out to the site. He does this audit to verify all this. Once that's complete, he's satisfied, then we'll grant you a generator certification. Basically, what that allows you to ship directly to the CWF. What that does is prevents discrepancies in the future. So you know that the requirements of void fill, you know the requirements of liquids that are allowed to be disposed of. We know that you can package, characterize, profile, and ship accordingly based off your policy and procedures. So it's just an extra factor in for us to know that it keeps us from having a lot of discrepancies and having to hold waste and waste profile approval process. So before sending any waste to WCS, we have to go through a waste profile approval. This is submitted and approved our leaks software tracking. Basically, a waste profile includes an overview of all the physical, chemical, and radiological characteristics of the waste stream we're sending. There's basically 17 sections in that waste profile, from the regulatory status of the waste being low level radioactive waste and low mixed waste, generated in Texas and Vermont, outside the state, or federally generated waste. We move into if there's any hazardous waste, how that waste is going to be treated prior to prior to disposal, meet LDR compliancy. Then we go into, is there any toxic irregularities? So material containing beryllium, asbestos, PCBs. Move on down in the sections, we'll go over all the chemical densities, flashpoint waste, go to the physical characteristics for radiological, so nuclide, isotope, minimum value in the profile, and then take those on down through highest dose rate, waste stream, and then on down through the certification statement that she did. So that's a very short overview of the waste profiling. We make sure the profile and supporting documents must demonstrate reasonability to insurance that the waste is correctly categorized under class A, B, and C under 30 tag 336, 362. Basically, that's the chart taken directly out of NCFR 61.55 waste characterization. Documentation must include methodology and basis for methodology used to classify the waste and characterize the waste, as well as determine a basis adequate for the appropriate characterization. So a little flow chart here. So basically, this is how the waste profile approval processes. We'll go through a couple of different scenarios here. So we start with the generator submitting an import application. Our application is done through our lead software, and then it's picked up by technical service project manager. Technical service project manager will basically review all 17 sections of the compliance form and start on the back end work for our compliance form for where the waste is going to land. If any treatment needs to be done, if resin needs to be void filled, if it's hazardous, if waste will be treated prior to disposal, they will rate all that. They will send it out to 2 other groups. So those groups go to RAD, the health and safety, and will validate their part. So we're getting on down to the box at the very bottom. So is there a reason the profile cannot be approved? If somebody caught an angle to where something didn't look like the profile, we push back to the TSPM. The TSPM would work with the generator to correct that issue, and then we start the process all over. Let's say there is not a reason, we need to go on. So the next thing would be the initial waste profile stage, and then we would dictate whether the pre-shipment sample is required. So pre-shipment sample is required for certain waste streams going to the LLRW, the CWF, and the FWF, really based off waste matrix. Most of that are soil-like material, where we analyze for liquid components, volatiles, herbicides, pesticides. We go through a standard protocol there for that type of waste. If that's not required, then it goes on to TSPM. He approves it. They get with business development. They attach into it. Then we send out a letter basically to the generator telling them their waste profiles. At that point in time, the waste profile is approved. The generator then can start creating a ship. So in the middle of all that, we didn't discuss if after the pre-shipment sample is defined, needed or not needed. We have to determine whether importation. So is importation needed for this waste stream? Is it going to the complex waste facility? Is that another state of Texas and Vermont? Yes, the importation is needed. So we'll generate, the customer will then reach out to the compact via the website and the form that was listed on the first page, and they're going to go through the import petition. It's going to basically generate name and address. contact who's submitting the application. Are you a generator broker? What's your generator type? Are you a small or large quantity generator? The fiscal year. So the fiscal year for the imports are a little different than a calendar fiscal year or even the base fiscal year and multi-other. So it goes basically from September 1st to August 31st of the following year. So that is your importation year. Sometimes we'll wind up an issue to where you'll import waste in August, it doesn't get disposed of, creating a new import for the next fiscal year. Those dates are important. September 1st, August 31st is the important. Waste volume is important. Waste activity and curious, waste form A, B, and C, and then the waste form of the waste. So we always want you to be as critical as you can when determining what to put on the import application in regards to the amount of volume and the amount of curious. We don't want you overemphasizing that you're going to import in 15,000 curious when you're really only importing 6,000. But we also want you to be a little less conservative. We don't want you to say that you're going to import in 500 curious and it turns out your evaluation is 600, right? So there's a happy medium there where you're not over evaluating, but you're also protecting yourself. That way you don't have to go through a amendment process in order to increase curious or volume. So we always want you to think about that. And I understand that waste volume and waste activity for an import year from a generator is difficult to try to figure out exactly how much we're going to ship. But it's always better to aim a little high, not a lot, a little high, in order to protect yourself in case you come in. Most of the time at that point in time, you really do know your waste classes though. So there shouldn't be a lot of amendments done to class A, B, and C unless you come across, I don't know, valve stuck in the RWCU or something like that where you create a waste stream. Why we'll have to go back and add DC waste if all you do is class A. All right, so finishing up the import application, we've got compact unaffiliated states, territorial possessions, or additional United States where the waste is generated. That's important. So we found out recently that a lot of people like to put compacts on it. Well, certain compacts, so there's certain states with each compact, right? But they don't also, especially if you're a broker, they don't actually apply to every single state we waste from. So we'll let you determine what you need to do there, but I wouldn't list compact, I would list individual states. Therefore, you don't get into the predicament to where you're missing a state because you use the affiliation. Waste description, what is the waste? DAW, is it resin, is it non-rated hardware? Is it a rated hardware? Does the applicant have any unresolved violations, complaints, or unpaid fees to the Texas level? And any associated radioactive waste storage, handling, method, processing, transportation pending with another regulatory agency. So those are the main questions going on import application. David, I'm sure that I left off with you. I know that the new thing is you fix the box for where the waste is currently sitting. So there is a box now for where the waste is currently sitting that you need to answer the import application. So whether the state's in Michigan or California or sitting at WCS site, that needs to be answered prior to the import application being state. Waste shipment approval process. So basically, we're going to verify an active profiles on file. We're going to verify that the waste subject conforms to the profile as far as nuclides, the activity, the dose rate, and the general form of the waste. The container that's being shipped in needs to be on the profile as well. So we'll validate that the cask or the drum or the package that the material being shipped in is conformance to the profile. Approval shipment type of facility, will review the advanced manifest to ensure compliance with the profile, confirm the current import agreement is in place, adequate for shipment for volume queries, waste class, and waste form. We will verify that the authorized, that says an authorized cask user for the particular cask that you're sending in. We will ask for the transporter certificate of insurance to let they have the minimum requirements under this program to bring waste down the road and be accepted at the waste control specialist. We will confirm that the WAP and the WAC conform to the waste stream coming in, as well as the radioactive material license and the permits. We will communicate the appropriate WCS personnel regarding the timing, shipment, and makeup. We will establish a delivery date, and then we will send a shipment approval letter to them. That's a very high level process of how they ship us moving. So final paperwork verification. So on the day of shipment, we have a DL shipping docs group that everybody sends paperwork to. This is basically after the generator signed the manifest, the shipper signed the manifest, copy of the shipment log, radioactive surveys of the truck as well as the container go into that file as well. Basically, we use that as a verification that what you submitted previously hasn't changed. So we understand a lot of liners being say measured and characterized underwater tend to change a little bit after the fact after you get them out of the pool. So a lot of the times the paperwork will actually change, and we're just doubting it still meets the program requirements for activity volume, dose rates, and container style on the active program. We'll obtain a copy of the CDL from the driver, his name and phone number, so also an event to keep home, and then obtain pre-shipment departure radiological surveys and waste acceptance upon receipt. So once the truck finally gets there, basically the waste, we'll verify the waste is shipped under active profile. Shipment was authorized by WCS. Radiological surveys are performed on the vehicle as well as the containers to make sure that the dose rates on these surveys, doses in the profile, conform to the waste that's actually being brought to the site. We will go through each manifest, make sure it matches the container number to the 541 of the NRC manifest. We'll make sure the container numbers match. We'll make sure the proper labeling is there. Is it how it was shipped based on proper shipping name? Is it labeled correctly in correspondence with the hazard? Each rated got listed with shipping documents consistent with the waste profile. We'll verify for the packaging integrity. Make sure there's no holes in the bag. Make sure the container's not leaking. Make sure there's no external contamination on the container, the bag, the drum, whatever the process be, or the truck itself, depending on if it's shipped in a cast, a flatbed truck, or a so. We'll ensure that the package is properly labeled, and then at that point in time, the state regulators for TCEQ will also come out and they will also do their own aspects. They will do those rates, they will verify contamination, they will do documentation. And then once we get to go from them, that shipment is good, then we'll move on to acceptance. Then we'll move on to disposal. So waste approved for disposal. So once the waste is accepted, packaged, waste is at the CDMF, it's then placed into a modular concrete canister. We have two types of GC. We have a cylindrical, we have a rectangle, and we have a double rectangle. Only difference between the single rectangular and the double rectangular is the length, right? The height, the width are all going to be consistent. It just basically doubles the length of the double system. All the waste at the CDMF has to be containerized and has to be placed into the modular concrete canister. Then, depending on the hazard, it's either grouted or sanded, fill the void in the MCC, and then the lid is placed on the MCC, and it's geotagged and disposed of in our elite software. Then that is a very old but constant picture of our facility, the CWF. So as you're seeing here, you're seeing a bunch of cylindrical MCCs, they're being stacked. And we just, in March of this year, we just opened up phase 2. So we opened up, we're in the same type of B in phase 2. Phase 2 also stacked one higher than phase 1 did. And the way this worked, they're kind of like leggings. It's kind of impressive. So you take the lid off, the MCC sits on top of it, it becomes lid, and at the very top, the last level, just the one lid for it's other than that, it's all that I have to story.
Hold off on questions till after the panel's done, if that's all right with everybody, including the online folks. We'll have to come to Q&A. I think Mr. Von On, you're next from the Department of State Health Services.
Yes.
I'm Dr. Von On, Department of State Health Services. I'm the manager of Radioactive licensing section, and I just want to go over what we have or what we do in terms of the waste generation and the processing and the transportation components. It's kind of split up among different agencies and stuff. We start off with the fact that, it doesn't necessarily affect the compact so much, but we license the people who generate the waste. This is how we keep track of what goes on the backside. Next slide. Part of what I want to do, part of this presentation is go over the different agencies that are involved. So we have the ESA roles and responsibilities and the statutory definitions and requirements that we use when we evaluate the waste generation, transport, and disposal. And so that's what we're going to go from, is to cover some of those areas, and that's a general line. We're going to go. Next. Agencies involved is going to be the Department of State Health Services. We license the possession and use of the radioactive materials within the state. There's also a memorandum of understanding between SHS and TCU as to what the different roles, responsibilities are. And the same thing is there's also another codified memorandum of understanding between the DISHS and the Railroad Commission. So we also register the shippers of the low-level radioactive waste and also register the transporters of the low-level waste. And as we go through the rules and see, you'll see the different areas where there's a difference between the two, and we will be adjusting some of that. Next. CQ in general handle like as to uranium mining and some of the other mineral extractions, and they handle the waste disposal and processing. That's what they do. The Railroad Commission takes care of the disposal of oil and gas norm waste. And the low-level radioactive waste disposal compact commission addresses the compact, which is the state of Texas and the import or export of waste in or out of that particular compact. So, if you have waste coming in from other states, it's coming into WCS, that's into this compact. But if we also have a generator that is going to be shipping something outside of the state, then they also have to get an export agreement. So that's where the roles are for the different agencies. We license and regulate the possession, use, and handling of radioactive materials for the purpose of protecting health, safety, environment. We derive our authority from the Health and Safety Code 401, which is also known as the radioactive materials and other sources of radiation. And we have our administrative rules. This is in 25 TAC 289 for the radiation control, and that's also referred to as the Radiation Control Act. Actually, the HSC for once radiation control. So then again, we register shippers and we register transporters. And these terms are going to be defined. Statutory authority comes out of the Health and Safety Code 401, which is also again called the Radiation Control Act. That identifies that act in HS Health and Safety Code, which is the statute, identifies which agencies are involved. It also sets the scope of authority between the different agencies and sets the requirements for the agency's roles. So when we start taking a look at who does what, why, when, and where, that's because it's all based on the investment. Although occasionally it's always just be nice to say, hey, that's somebody else's job. I think that goes for anything that we can do. Okay. Next slide. Definitions. There, the Administrative Code defines disposal, defines the radioactive substance. It defines what's naturally occurring radioactive waste or norm waste, and oil and gas norm waste. So in general, the disposal means with regards to low-level waste, isolation and removal, so that it goes into an area where it can be treated sometime in the future. There's also radioactive substances, it defines that, and with that also comes in the definitions for what waste is, and that's where all these other definitions come. Next. An HSC 401, 004, it defines what radioactive waste is, and it also says what it's not. So there's the is basically out of the rule. It says that it's discarded or unwanted and is not exempt from department rules. It's waste as determined, it's defined in 10 CFR 61. So I got concentration limits, disposals, and waste does not include high-level waste, spent nuclear fuel, byproduct material, as identified in the 401-003, and by that byproduct material would be for the tailings from uranium. And so, and naturally occurring radioactive material that is not oil and gas, norm waste, or oil and gas. It's not the same, right? Rules that way, that's what the definitions are. So when we start defining what is low-level radioactive waste, it's got specific criteria for what, how it's defined, because that makes a difference in terms of how we can regulate what waste are coming. Next, out of 289, 257D definition, it basically goes in and reiterates the definitions for low-level waste. It just takes it back in. And so for a registered shipper, it's also defined as shipper having an emergency plan approved and specified in subsection R, which is on the 257. And the shipping containers approved as specified in this section and issued a registration letter. That's what we can do. Is we will take a look, we will do this and issue a registration letter. Registered transporter is the one who ends up transporting the materials from that will be taking it on the road. So a shipper is the one who's going to be packaging the waste, and we take a look at that. Transport is the one who's going to be taking it down the road and or down the rails. We have done transportation for the railroads. So it's a matter of making sure that they have the proper emergency plans in place in case there's any type of transportation. Residual waste was also defined as defining as to, hey, sometimes you get waste collectors and their aggregate waste and their decounting stuff. Who's going to keep track? Who's going to be responsible for the waste? And that's where residual waste comes. And the shipper is defined again as the one who's actually the license entity that's actually generating. And there's another thing here too, says the definition only applies to shipments of low-level radioactive waste shipped to a Texas low-level radioactive waste disposal facility. But just because you have to have some type of waste in your shipping, it does not necessarily mean that you're a shipper that's going to become a registered shipper. So there are some limits on it. So basically, we end up giving our registrations for, in short, what goes to WDS for the shipper and transport. That's the general rule of thumb. Next, rules for transportation and routing. This comes out of the regular statute, and the first part that comes in that the DSHS is going to be the one who's going to adopt the rules for transportation and shipment. And those rules are actually located in 25 Tech 287, 257, packaging and transportation of radioactive materials. So we have multiple sections in our rules, for example, general waste, radioactive materials licensing, medical licenses, well logging, etc. are different sections, and the transportation rules are the 257. And this has to be compatible with also the NRC rules, which are what's in the 10 CFR 71. So that's where they have to be compatible. And 25 TAC 57 E5 goes into the requirements for transportation and route alternative routes. So this is basically where are you going to be taking it, shipping it, and that could be anywhere within the state, or if it's coming across the state to WCS. Where are you going to be taking it? Generally, we stick to interstates or low population densities, and if there's something there, what are the alternative routes, so that we can take a look at what the primary routes are going to end up being. And we also work on training our emergency responders for emergency response to transportation. Slide 12.
Is that This is before the
Slide 12.
virtual.
This goes into the emergency plan, so we have to have an emergency plan that's approved. And, that's where the statute says that. And where you find that is under 257 R, there's an emergency plan registration requirements. That's where it spells out all the requirements for what needs to be in the details in this setup. So, what's on some of the other items there. 13. Okay, you have to have notifications and accident reports. So what we do is we also have a part of our section of our rules. This is where it comes out of statute, and we just end up clarifying it under the administrative code. And this is where we end up having that we have to be notified, and there's also the requirements that the here requires that the local emergency response agencies which county be notified. So we normally we take a look at these and review them. We'll get an entire list of all the committees you'll be going through and who all the emergency contacts are for that particular counties. Working goes into a whole bunch of quality control for shippers. This goes into the QA requirements, the organization of QA programs, quality control programs. And this is all designed to make sure that, hey, what type of packages are you putting this waste into? Are you putting it into a 182 drone? Okay, what's the certification of that drone? There's certain DOT requirements for that, for the drones, and or are you putting it into other packages? Or does it have to go into high integrity containers? This is, there are certain requirements that you need for the packaging to make sure that it's not going to be safe and that it's actually durable and transportation requirements. So this is where that one comes in. A lot of times people say, hey, most of our shippers will end up saying, hey, it's going to go into a 35-gallon standardized. Sometimes they make that. Sometimes things will also be shipped by rail. Of course, everything goes down to fees. Nothing gets done without charge, except of course registering shippers and transporters. Charging people that we make up for it on the backside when you actually send something to WCS. We don't get any. We don't take any normal advance notifications for that. We will get copies of manifests for billing purposes of the waste that was actually disposed of at WCS. So I get daily emails as to what's coming in. So when we just go in, and that's where we end up sending out for our billing department to actually send out these. That's typically about $10 a cubic foot until there's a certain max that comes up, and that's based on the manifest that we need. We pay for first responders on the transportation routes, the training of them, because we actually set people out for training. There's MS1 drills where you sit down and say, how well can the emergency personnel of the local hospitals, how well can they respond to a transportation accident? And there may be other costs that are associated with accidents. So this is where that all goes into that particular funding. So that's where that's all going. All that funding is like one for those types of activities society. Liability insurance. There's certain DOT requirements for carrying insurance. 257E4 has a transporters proof of financial responsibility. This is basically transportation insurance. There's actually two levels of this insurance that is required. If you are having your non-highway route control level, it's $1 million insurance policy. You are going to be having highway route control policies of radioactive materials. It's now a $5 million policy. So that's part of why we take a look at our transporting letters to see whether it is for highway route control or non-highway route control classifications. That's based upon the amount of insurance that they're actually carrying for the shipper definition. Shipper means the person generates or level waste or ships or ranges with others to ship the waste to a disposal site. And that's on statute, it's a separate section, but it's also included in our regular definitions. So as you start going through our rules, trying to figure out where certain things go and come from, try to find out that we try to keep it so that we're meeting the requirements and not adding just stuff, in life slowing needed. So that's something that's always in consideration. Advanced notifications. Advanced notifications are for certain types of reactors, that certain quantities of radioactive waste. Some paragraphs, 1 and 2 tells you that, you know, what you end up having to report under additional sections. And those basically says you have to notify the governor, or if you're going through tribal areas, then you have to notify the tribal people. So that they have notification, so that you can transport it. And then there is notification for meeting criteria, procedures for submitting notifications, and the content of notifications. And so there's a lot of other additional requirements that's spelled out in rule. I'm not going to fill up screens for all types of documentation. Actually, in the slide decks in here, I do have speaker's notes. All copies of parts of the rules look like, so there's a lot of them to go through. So that's even just a summary of what's there. So there's quite a few other ones. So shipping it, that's where you want to take. Transfer for disposal of manifest. Basically, what they end up having to do is there's certain requirements to have a transfer manifesting. And what that is normally done is by using the NRC forms, because that's incorporated in the rules. So that you're basically using the NRC 540 and the 541s. So that's going to be first one is going to waste manifest, and the other one is going 541 is going to be waste characterizations. And that goes into see those great cute sheets, you know what they are. They're detailed on what the information is. Different types of waste characterizations. Registration. Again, there's no fee to register with us to be a shipper or a transporter. And it's based on the waste that's shipped to WCS. Take a look at the applications, and actually it's we even send for the emergency responses and emergency transportation routes. We actually send that to our incident response group, and they do the actual documents. They give us a thumbs up or thumbs down as to what that deserted wants to go out to get responded. So all the forms are available on our radiation control webpage. We try to keep it a fairly simple form, and it tells you the different parts that you need to submit. And there's one application for a shipper registration, and there's another one for waste transfer registration. So that's where you do. So basically, in summary, we're one of multiple agencies that end up addressing low-level radioactive waste. Our rules cover the materials, storage, handling, and disposition of it. We register the shipper and transporters, and we collect fees for the waste disposal. Any questions?
You want to say those two names?
We'll save until the end, Carl. Is that right? Let Chance go next, then we'll save questions for all three of y'all.
Good morning. Happy Friday the 13th. I'll just say what they said. They did a very good job covering it. Good morning. My name is Chance Finley. I'm from Radioactive Materials section at the TCU, and I'm here to cover the Texas Combat Import Petition and Certification process at TCU. I'll cover real high level, since Ryan did a really good job of our role in low level radioactive waste proposal as it relates to WCS. Also, import petition review and certification process, the disposal fees, called operate without fees, and then how we verify capacity, and then the study of capacity that. Next slide. Okay, so radioactive materials license 4100 is the license that WCS holds. That license includes the federal waste facility, the compact waste facility, the byproduct facilities that is currently limited to just from all byproduct waste, also the treatment storage there. We have 6 staff dedicated to the review of that license, and our reviews just encompass multitude of things. We generally do that through major and minor amendments. And we are currently in the technical review phase of renewal for this. We've reviewed groundwater monitoring reports, performance assessments, environmental monitoring, health effect, radiation safety, we're involved in construction, human construction, disposal, financial assurance, the list goes on and on. We want to note that we do have 2 on-site inspectors. Brian mentioned that inspect every place that comes to the site. We have additional site inspectors that are available for compliance and investigation. Some come from Austin. So next slide. So what does the import petition review and certification process look like? The waste compact facility which receives a low-level radioactive waste from Texas and Vermont, also can receive low-level radioactive waste from other states. And so those imports must be approved through the Texas Compact. First, pursuant to the Texas Health and Safety Code and the Texas Administrative Code, TCQ will review those import applications to make sure that MCF is authorized to dispose of that waste. And then second, we'll ensure that the volume, type, is conform, and the total radioactivity is provided. So if all those requirements have been met, the TCQ will send a correspondence to WCS and the Compact Commission stating that the waste is authorized under the license. So I do want to note here that a certification does not complete, finalize, or guarantee the final acceptance of a shipment. Waste is still subject to applicable statute rules, license conditions, and waste acceptance criteria does not represent authorization to dispose of non-party waste prior to the subject application or import of the non-party waste by. So I also add here as part of the process, which we don't actually do in my group, but we prior to the waste being shipment, the TCP resident inspector receives at least a 5-day notification before arrival, and then this allows that inspector to discuss any of the findings that they may have on the manifest with WCS. Then after arrival, the inspector coordinates with WCS for the final manifest accuracy, verifies the acceptance criteria has been met, and performs the visual inspection and survey of the waste. He actually mentioned that in his presentation. He also talked about the contract piece. I didn't have that here because that contract piece is also evaluated with TCQ in our legal department. So the disposal fees associated with the compact waste facility. TCQ is charged with establishing the compact disposal rates. Those rates are found in a figure adopted in Chapter 6.13.10. Those charges are based on the volume, the radioactivity, and related hazardous shipment surcharges. For party waste, the fees must be equal or less than the established rate. And then for non-party waste, fees must be greater than the established rates. So on a quarterly basis, the TCQ reviews non-party charges for rule compliance. So verifying capacity, the TCQ will assist the compact in monitoring amounts of waste disposed in the compact waste facility. We achieve this by WCS license condition 96, which states in part that WCS shall maintain records of the type, form, quantity of waste disposed, including waste profiles, waste manifests, and additional waste shipment information. Then WCS will provide that quarterly and receipts and disposal activity reports. to the TCQ no later than the 10th day that follows the end of each quarter. I mentioned on this slide, but also license condition 22 states that MSW will report annually by October 1st of each year on the status of the land disposal facility, future capacity, and that's all summed up from the quarterly summary. We get that report, the TCQ with review and verification of those reports. Slide. Okay, so the capacity study report, as required by Chapter 401, GC conducts a study and produces a capacity report every 4 years. This report includes future needs of both volume theories, radioactivity, K assessment, the containerization type of waste, the health and safety effects of the projected waste, and cost benefits of the volume reduction and stabilizing the waste. That report is provided to the Texas legislature and it is available on the website. The last report that we did was the 2024 capacity report, and that was posted on our website in July of 20. Next slide.
Before we open it up to questions, Commissioner Janetka made an important point that I want to explain. There's one agency that we did not invite today, does have a role, tangential role in all this, and that's the Railroad Commission. Railroad Commission regulates NORM, which is naturally occurring radioactive materials. The reason we didn't invite him is because NORM material does not go to the compact waste facility. It is treated separately, and I've never had anyone tell me this, but I assume the reason the Railroad Commission gets to regulate that is because the vast majority of NORM is generated from oil and gas operations, so it fits within their purview naturally, since they also regulate oil and gas. But that is the one agency that probably wasn't here today that does have a role in disposal of what we viewed as another type of low-level radioactive materials.
I have a line that we've done in the Q&A. Probably the right person to do it. This is from Brad Gibson. He says, where does Texas DPS come into the regulation of the transportation stream? Who confirms that the shippers or shipments are in compliance with the federal motor carrier safety regulations, the hazardous materials regulations, and the Texas Transportation Code? Got a lot of questions. Maybe we want to seem quite a bit. Let's you try those first.
We don't have anybody that actually sits down and reviews and inspects those. There are certain types of advanced notifications. So advanced notifications goes to the governors, but governors designees. The DPS has the option to review the vehicles that come and go. So that is based on those notifications, because those notifications come and goes through the particular. So that comes in, it gets disseminated as to what they are, and I believe they're on the notification list. So if they choose to go through and follow and take motor carriers, they can do that. And otherwise, it's DPS. It just does the routine motor vehicle checks. There are, when you run across the advanced notifications or some of these reportable quantities for shipments, it's not only waste, but you can also do a couple of large radiator facilities that are in the state of Texas. So, when they get shipments for refueling, they're going to have 100 to 150,000 curies that's going to be transporting. They may end up saying, hey, we got large quantities here. We're going to check the vehicles when they come. I've been in situations where I've watched where they can buy and the entire vehicle checks before it ever set facility. So DPS does their own. We don't regulate that. But once you go into the motor vehicles, that's under DPS, and they are notified for large quantity shipments, but not. I think that covers pretty much everything that was being asked.
I think so. I'll read the rest of it too. It says, what's the current court of action? I think you asked that. Mr. Gibson asked that question. If you have any follow-up, Mr. Gibson, feel free to type some more if you've got. And I've got a question online from Judge Dolgener, who's beyond the commission. He has a question. Judge Dolgener, if you'll unmute yourself, you can ask your question.
I was just gonna comment, the commercial motor
No,
vehicle.
we can't hear. Judge, we can't hear you. Well, he
Judge,
wasn't.
can we hear you?
He's still on mute.
Yeah, he's on mute.
Maybe turn off your stuff.
Judge, we need you to turn off your mute to hear you.
But now,
There we go.
you hear me?
And we still can't hear him. Let's try.
No, we can also type the question.
Yeah, let's do that.
Judge Dolgener, you want to just type it in and I'll ask it for you? Does anybody else have any questions? Hey, Mr. Carlson.
Yeah, I just want to start a chance. The Compact Commission has noted that the last capacity report that was done didn't address small modular reactors. And obviously they may be delayed. Do you anticipate that the next capacity report, TCQ does, will address small modular reactors and waste streams from this? Or is that something that the public? So, future waste.
Yeah, I mean, what that report represents is all the manifests.
Yeah. Oh, I think it's
I'm not aware of most waste streams that's supposed to go through Mark right now. Yeah.
No, couldn't hear Judge
I
Dolgener.
have a strange question that I've always wondered. When you showed the overhead of the entire facility, I've always wondered, why was the federal facility so much larger at inception? So you didn't know? I don't.
And you
I don't
know
the answer.
Soon we.
Yeah, that was actually.
By comparison, how much larger is a federal facility than compact wastewater, you know,
I don't know.
just on a square footage basis? 8 to 10 times.
I think it's like 2 million cubic yards for the FWF, and it's like. Something like that.
That's
Yeah, for the compact. So it's double.
Let's see, that's turned up all the way now.
This had to be primitive. You had to turn it from.
May I ask a question?
Okay, let's see if that works.
Obviously, DCS full client service, just one-stop shop. Where in the process for a new client would you, if they're bringing something, you want to import something, what point in that process do you tell them about the import requirements that we have?
So as soon as we figured out which facility, we looked at the volume activity, we figured out which facility was going to. And if that facility was up front CWF, we start transportation up front on contract. It would be done very, very.
Early, as soon as you guys know exactly what you want to do. Yeah.
Yeah, it's done before we had a contract. That's what we have.
Yeah.
So I can see a new client might not have a clue.
I'm running the HDMI cable to this.
As a follow-up on that, is there ever a
There.
time
Can you turn the
when truly because they don't have the data or they don't have the analysis done that you have to say, well, we're gonna have to
It's max volume.
defer determining where that waste is gonna go? Because they need to go back and gather more information or do more investigation for you.
It is. Yeah, get more that way directly to the CWF without.
Working one of those.
No,
So.
not that.
yes, we would consult all the information later and make that process.
We'll give this a try.
Judge Dolgener actually typed in what his response was. He actually had a comment. He said the CW trooper, not line that you can read on the screen, do inspect vehicles with WCS, but he didn't. See, Judge Dolgener used to be, those who don't know, he used to be county judge. in Andrews County for many years, and it's also local law enforcement, person for many, many years as
He's
well.
still local law.
Yeah, he's now.
Yeah, he's the constable. Yeah.
So I would actually just like to make a comment. Really to thank WCS, or the Department of State Health Services, Texas Commission. This combination of the presentations you all made, I think, is very important to help people understand. You want to ship low-level radioactive waste, it is an incredibly complex process. And the idea that entities could do this whim is ludicrous. And so, because sometimes we get questions about, well, how do we know these people are really doing what they're supposed to be doing? Concerns about health and safety. I think the presentations have helped the audience understand this is complex, and individuals or entities that do this are sophisticated. You have to be very sophisticated. So thank you.
And the process makes it a very safe. It has got enough safeguards in it that I think anyone who ever had a concern about transportation issue or the way the waste gets from the generator to the site, I think if they heard what was said, I think they would have no question that it's a safe process. So we appreciate it. Yes.
So, question for you, may help us define that. So, shipper transporter, right? So there's different registrations based off of your shipper or transporter. One is a lot longer than the other. Why?
The way, well, what's defined in rule for the term of the license is 10 years for each one. For both the shipper and for the transporter. And there's also a caveat in there for the part that says, for the transporter, that transporter registration ends when that insurance policy has an expiration date. If you have an annual expiration date to the insurance policies that you are submitting to us, then it's only good for that term of that insurance policy. When we get the new insurance policy with a new expiration date, we will take a look at that, and that's called a renewal for that registration for the transporters. Shippers do not have to have that type of insurance. For the generation of it, they just have to have the policies, procedures in place for the safe packaging of the materials, and therefore that one could just go for 10 years.
That doesn't. If you're a shipper, it's 10 years. If it's your certification date.
We have another question, I think, for you, Carl, from Clint Miller for PG&E. He asked, when can dishes enable WCS Texas to collect a $10 per cubic foot fee? We often have to ask dishes for the bill. It's difficult for us to issue a check payment.
That's something I would have to address with the billing, because a lot of times we don't get the manifest or when they come in, and then when our staff gets through. So.
If you want to follow up with Carl, can he follow up with you
Yeah.
directly?
Yeah, because on my slides, there was the email address for my email address and for the brand licensing. And there, I did not put on one there for billing, but we will be more than happy to give you as well, so we can ask the questions to them directly. Questions about payments. I don't know, sometimes if there are delays, shipment may come in and may sit there. We may have to go through waste acceptance, and there may be delays between the time that they ship it and potentially arrives at WCS to the time that WCS says, okay, everything's fine, here's the manifest.
I think I can, Carl, because I've talked with Clint about this. I think one concern that I think Clint's trying to share is that them, they have to pay you separately than paying through DPS when they pay DPS for some of the other fees. And they're looking for a way to just pay once, but they don't have to write separate checks, dishes. Is there a way for them to do that, or is there some sort of policy reason why that's not allowed actually for me to collect it through WCS?
It's going through different agencies, and our fees goes into the radiation and perpetual care account. which is for emergency response handling. Where the DPS fees go. They would have the answer.
So I think we looked at that. I mean, it would be easier for customers if, like the surcharges, we could collect the Department of State Health Services fees. But I think it's somewhere in rule, it's something that's just what they, I mean, ideally, it's something we can collect all that for you. Write the check to PSHS, just like we do with TCQ, just like we do with with the county. Is that at this point, does that seem right?
Yeah, that tends to ring a bell. I can't guarantee that, but for the private ways, we can absolutely right.
Trump. So there are three agencies in the state of Texas. And Texas is an agreement state. So do all three agencies get impact? Are they broken up? Just two?
Just to, we have the Texas Department of State Health Services. We get an impact, which is when the Nuclear Regulatory Commission comes in, our rules have to be compatible with theirs, and they look at how we implement the rules for the licensing, inspections, and handling of the materials. So if we want to control the licensing of all of that, this will end up getting the most of the different types of licenses. The ones that go for TCQ is for the waste disposal, and some of the other uranium minings and some of the other ones that TCQ. So there are there's two separate inputs. And I believe that on the NRC website, they actually maintain, I think, I'm trying to remember if it's just one combined one or two separate. Yeah. You remember,
one combined report in my recollection, but NRC staff are hard pressed to double book themselves for one single week being in two different agencies. I don't think they would possibly have the bandwidth to delve into a third agency. If Railroad Commission activities rose to the level that they wanted to participate.
And just in general, so it's all on Railroad Commission.
I know.
So there's no federal regulation. So it's sacred.
In this, so levity two is also your levity two license. So that's reviewed through TC.
Correct.
Okay.
It is actually a different license. The only one that's different.
Correct. Mr. Miller has a comment online, said, in the text of the import agreement statement about no violations be refined to state no violations associated with this management program. The power plant we operate with non-cited and sometimes cited violation not in place. Be a false statement, answer no unless associated with waste is added.
That's
Actually, I think at least the question that our commission asks is pretty well defined about radioactive waste and shipping of radioactive materials. I don't think it is open-ended about any violation that a nuclear power.
That sounds like law question is where it is.
Anybody else have any questions for this town? No, y'all want to take a break for a few minutes and get some coffee and some pastries back here?
We need to take a break.
Thanks, Jordan. Thank you.
Thank you. Everybody, let's break for 20 minutes. We'll come back at 10:05.
I think the table will still get you.
Yep, I adjusted it. And then
So I just want to see it started.
Linda, you ready? Ready to go? Let me introduce you real quick.
Sure. We always like being introduced.
is this the correct one?
Yes.
So if I stand here, will they, you'll see me or not?
Just check, they should be able to.
Well, they're in slideshow, they won't see it anymore.
So they're just going to flash.
Or maybe I can-
Okay, so.
So I think we'll go ahead and get started again. Our next panel is two distinguished speakers that I'm very proud of. It is Commissioner Linda Morris and our Executive Director, Stephen, excuse me. And they will be talking about some of the issues that the compact deals with related to the same thing in the last panel.
Yes, sorry.
Here's a little, this is an overview of the presentation.
Can I stand up and be seen?
Yes, you can, yes.
Okay, good. I'm more comfortable standing up and talking. I don't know that. Anyhow, so with the previous slide kind of showed what we want to talk about this part using from the perspective of the Compact Commission. So again, I'm a former higher education professor, right? Health physics, right? So no, there will not be a test. Everyone should know this by now, because how many of our speakers have defined have defined low level waste? Yeah, several of y'all have. So no, I'm not going to really do that. I think we know what low level radioactive waste is. I will say that this is how our compact defines it. And the next slide also goes into the fact that, let's see, next slide. Okay. Oh, yeah, streamers. Okay. What it's not too. So, and that's kind of the way I used to talk to my students and say, well, low level radioactive waste is not these things, and kind of what's left is. But I want to stop before we go any further and say, not every compact defines radioactive waste in the same manner. In the back, we have Dan Schrum. Everybody's met Dan, right? Shake your heads yes if you've met, and everybody knows Dan. I'm going to ask him to make an announcement in a minute. But at our last Low Level Waste Forum meeting in Reno, not too long ago, he had a presentation for the different compacts. And it was shocking and amazing to me. There are significant differences between the different compacts. So I'd like to spend just a few minutes talking about the compacts and things that we do and don't do. But one of the things that I just mentioned was that not everybody defines radioactive waste the same. The Rocky Mountain Compact, for example, has a much more expansive definition of radioactive waste and the things they regulate. But this is the definition, the previous slide and this one, the way that we in the Texas Vermont Compact define low-level radioactive waste. So we know it's not some of these things. It's not high-level spent fuel, byproduct, norm, and gas, and we've already said oil and gas norm. The Texas Railroad Commission. Well, in other states, they don't do that. They have a lot of oil and gas norm, but it's not regulated by a similar agency up there. It's usually maybe some of the other folks. So there are significant differences between the compacts and the states and how some of this radioactive waste is managed and discussed. Next slide, please. So we don't also do NARM, naturally occurring and accelerator produced radioactive material. The Compact Commission, this Compact Commission has no jurisdiction over that material. Okay, so next slide, what is a compact? Everybody here probably knows, but we found over the last few years, some entities may not be fully aware of what a compact is. A compact, as it says, is an agreement between two or more states. And it's interesting that a state, and all this evolved from what, the 1980 Low Level Waste Policy Act. When I first got into the business of working in my first job as a UT Medical Branch in Galveston, and we sent our radioactive waste to Barnwell, South Carolina, and didn't even think twice about it. We were sending our waste off to Barnwell. Well, then Barnwell said, well, and then, started complaining like we shouldn't be, I'm not reading into it, but what I thought they were saying was that we shouldn't be the only place in the U.S. that can really accept this kind of waste. Then it kind of triggered the need for federal regulation regarding everybody needs, and the policy, a little waste policy act in 1980 said, states, you need to take responsibility for your own low-level radioactive waste. And then in 1985 came out and said, well, when Amendment Act came out and said, well, we need to, maybe, that's crazy. Every state, New Jersey, Rhode Island, being responsible for their own low-level radioactive waste, that wasn't going to work. So they said, well, let's do compact. So compact and agreement between two or more states. It has to be two states because I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, somebody, but Tennessee CFR 62 talks about if you're not part of a compact and you're on your own for radioactive waste side, if something bad happens, you can be forced to accept radioactive waste. Does that sound right? Those of you that know, okay, go back and look at Tennessee CFR 62. But anyway, so we formed it. So compact started forming. At least two states to dispose of waste, manage waste in a way that's safe and efficient. And all the compacts that have been formed have to be approved by the member states of the compacts and receive authorization from the U.S. Congress. So that's kind of what we did. So the next slide shows the compacts. And again, how many times have we seen this slide, folks? How many times? I've seen it at least 100 times. But anyway, so it is interesting that Texas and Vermont are good friends in Vermont. They have been faithful partners and we participant partners in our compact. But when we talk about compacts, then we also have talked about compact waste facilities. And our compact is the only one, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think I am, that has since the federal laws that were passed encouraging compacts to establish waste facilities. We're the only new one. Farmwell's existed for a long time. Hanford, all that stuff have been around a long time. So we're the only one that really came about. California tried hard to establish a low-level waste facility in California. That didn't work out. But so there's only the ones with the stars are the ones that are our current sites, and then we have the commercial site in Utah, in addition. But anyway, so it's interesting. It's got these weird geographic agreements, but we're very happy to have Vermont with us on this journey. So again, the next slide talks about the roles of the compacts, and again, I'm not going to really go over that because it's blah 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 kind of stuff. But one thing that the compacts do is theoretically in the beginning they said so every state doesn't have to have a facility and you just designate a facility within your compact, but a lot of the compacts could not establish a facility. So that's when we are so fortunate to have WCS and stuff to be the operator of our compact waste facility for our state and our compact. And then the Texas legislature passed laws back, what year was it, John? It was like 2010, 11-ish, saying that we could actually import waste from other states. We have the regulatory agencies sitting here a few minutes ago. They're not involved in interstate commerce. We are, which makes it a little different for us. Compacts can do that, can regulate the import and export of low-level radioactive waste in a compact. Anyway, so that's kind of the whole idea is, to encourage all these lofty goals, which I think we thought, to have an effective site. So next slide, please. Okay. So we do interact. Do compacts interact? We do. It's important for the compacts to kind of decide who's doing what. We do it. There's a very great organization called the Low-Level Waste Forum, and everybody knows that Dan Schrum is the executive director. Is that the right title?
Yes.
Okay. For the Low-Level Waste Forum, and we meet twice a year. And I'm going to let them make an announcement in just a moment. Okay. About the one good thing is that once we go to these things, we can talk to the other compacts and decide share common interests or common concerns. Most of the compacts, there's only like the 3 of us with compact waste facilities. The other 2 do not allow out of compact imports into their contracts. We're the only one that allows out of non-party or our compact to come in. So, but we've got the rules because some compacts say, well, we're fine, but we know that we have to, our low level waste generators within our compact need to send waste to compact waste facility. So they say, well, we're not gonna let you do it unless you get an export. And so, because remember the compacts, in our case, we looked at both the import and export of low level radioactive waste within our compact. But so they do. So some compacts say they have to have export permits. Some don't care, don't require paperwork like export permits. Do we do something?
They're fixing, the online sharing of slides.
It stopped waiting for something.
Okay.
We're working on it.
Do we need to wait or?
No, I think you can go ahead.
All right.
And I'll sit here. Let me.
It's a good time to remind everybody, they will get the full, slide deck if you, sign the sign-in sheet. So all this will be available to you later as well.
So anyway, so going back to the low waste forum, it allows us to get together and talk about things and our concerns and stuff, and kind of see how we can work it all out. So may I ask Stan to stand, maybe talk about the low waste forum news that might be of interest to you?
Yeah, our next meeting will be April 9th and 10th at the Odessa Marriott. We're going to really focus activities at WCS and the state of Texas and how we oversee the WCS facility. On April 8th, there'll be a tour of the Renco facility, which is next door in Eunice, New Mexico, and the WCS site. So if you're interested in attending, you just go to the local radioactive site, TLLWDCC.org, and register for the tour. And it should be, I think, especially with these two tours. If you've not been to the WCS site, I recommend it. It's a great facility. It's well run, and the Urenco is where they enrich uranium for power plants, and it's a fascinating site also. It's the best tour that you can't see.
That's rare to get that opportunity to tour them too. It's not.
Because they're very, they've got limited access because of what they do there, but they're happy to have us, and we'll just include that as part.
So if you're interested in the first part of the uranium fuel cycle.
That's the very beginning.
Yeah.
Other than mining.
Mining, yeah, which we do in Texas also. Okay, so it's important that the compacts interact to talk about import, export, managing waste, recommending regulations and things and stuff. So it's really good that we're able to have that. Now going on to the next slide. Again, it just talks about, well, it's one in between overview. It doesn't matter. Okay, never mind. We'll skip that.
So I don't have one.
Anyway, the public law that created the Texas Low-Level Radioactive Disposal Compact Commission was Public Law 105-236, ratified by the U.S. Congress in 1998. So we were late coming to the table when you think about the Policy Act, Amendments Act, 85 and stuff. It's quite a while later before our compact officially was established. Yeah, well, it's mainly about that. So, but it does say that the public law that was ratified by the Congress does say that we have the power to manage and dispose. We have management and disposal powers for the compact. So not just disposal, but also manage, and that's something that's pretty important. Now going on to this, and if you want to know where Carl and I talked about the Texas rules in their chapter 401 of the Health and Safety Code, Texas. Well, that's also where we find a lot of our rules too. We'll talk about stuff that's codified in that. Now, Now, if you want to get down to the actual rules, one of the earlier, was it this morning, one of the other CS folks talk about our rules. Well, these are our rules in the Texas Administrative Code. Definitions, where I think we've talked about small quantity generator definitions and stuff. That's where that stuff is defined. And export of waste for disposal, because like I said, import, export, interstate commerce stuff, that's us. So we do ask for, if you're going to be want to export low-level radioactive waste, please work with us on that. And then export for processing, return, importation, that's the big one that's been referred to this morning. We are unique in that our compact waste facilities unique to do class B and C, low-level radioactive waste. Then there's the management rule, which is an evolving rule, and the management rule talks about radioactive waste coming into the only Texas, the host state, or and not going to the compact waste facility. So we discovered a number of years ago that there were these other waste streams coming in, and we didn't really know much about how much and where it was going and what was happening to it once it was here. It was a big question mark, a big gaping hole in our knowledge. So we did ask the management rule, and there's just a few companies involved that do bring in low-level radioactive waste for different purposes. Might be going to the rec cell, WCS. It might be going for treatment in Houston, processing stuff. So we just want to know about that, because we feel like we owe it to the citizens of Texas. We'll say, well, this stuff's coming in, but we don't know what's happening to it once it's here, big question mark. We felt like, no, we need a little more information. So the management rule is attempting to fill that gap. We're not saying, no, you can't do it or anything else. We're just saying, just tell us what you're doing with stuff once it's here, and we'll be happy. So there's that, and then there's our capacity reservation. We always want to set aside in our for the amounts of radioactive material coming in for small quantity generators as defined in the 0.20 definition. So, but that's kind of a nice thing. So anyway, so those are where our rules are, because you're going to look at them. And the next slide just talks a bit about them. That's the public. Skip it. Then the management rule and stuff, and we've already mentioned that. So that's really slide 2. We're actually like so working with them, and we've had some really good conversations with our companies that are might be impacted by the management, but are impacted by the management rule. And we hope to have a revision of the rule available soon. We keep saying that. That's the plan. But yeah, so just so we can kind of know everything that's coming in and going out of our state, and hopefully being responsible for students. Okay, that's all.
Can I add a few things? Just
Sure.
one is an interesting historical side note. The policy in the original act actually talked about pairing large geographic states with small geographic states for the siting of under the same theory that Linda was talking about, where you didn't want small states having a facility. And that's how Vermont and Texas actually came together, because people often ask that. And as a weird historical side note, but there was actually a third state at one point. Maine was going to be part of our compact, but they had a facility called Maine Yankee that actually got decommissioned before the agreements were signed. So they, at that point, decided to back out. So it's interesting, because we are, and I guess the Atlantic Compact with South Carolina are the only two compacts that actually are kind of geographically diverse like that. Everyone else seems to be regionalized, but that's how we ended up being so geographically diverse. The other issue I was going to point out that the lawyer in me just can't not talk about it. The interstate commerce issue is one that I think is often glossed over, and it's important because without the compact system, there would be no way to regulate the free flow of low-level nuclear waste for disposal in our country. And a lot of people often say, I think the compact system doesn't serve a purpose. If nothing else, it serves that purpose. And without that, I think you might have a bit of a Wild West concept in the way low-level nuclear waste was disposed of. And obviously the legal nerdy side of that is the US Constitution has something called the Interstate Commerce Clause, which says it is only the federal government that can regulate interstate commerce. However, Congress, like it's done here, can actually hand out those interstate commerce regulatory powers through acts. And that's exactly what the low-level policy act is. So I had to be a lawyer nerd and follow up on that.
And I'll add one more thing. In addition to the geography, large states and small states, there's a technical reason as well in terms of how states gather together, because there are conditions around the country, both geology and hydrology, that would be well suited for the disposal of low-level radioactive waste. But there are also conditions around the country where it would not be suitable. And so smaller states have a smaller footprint and might very well, there may not be any location within that state where you could dispose of low-level radioactive waste in a safe manner. So there's a sort of a political, geographical, but there's also technical.
And one more marketing pitch. Our compact allows for other states to join. Not a lot of talk is given to that a lot, but there is a process by which if another state would like to join our compact, they would have to go through a process, and it includes a pretty large financial outlay. But we have never had that happen. But it is something that we have talked about in the past. That if a state or its corporate citizens have a desire to make sure they have a reserve capacity at the compact waste facility, the only real way to do that would be to join a compact. So that's always an option as well.
Thank you.
Everybody online, this is Steve Graves. I'm the executive director. I'm going to talk a little bit about the administrative portion, a little bit of the role that the compact plays that maybe sometimes that can't always hear. This first slide is about the importance of preserving capacity. I'm glad that Linda and Brandon and John pointed that out. One of the things that's important about joining the compact and the compact that has been created is the compact was created so Texas and Vermont have a place to dispose of their waste. That's the whole point of creating the compact, is that they have a location for that. And it's the duty of the compact to actually preserve capacity for the in-state generators. That we're watching over, we actually have a legal obligation to watch over what waste is coming into and out of compact waste facility, and regulating the out of compact waste to make sure there's room for the in compact waste to be there. And that is duty inside the compact language itself, and definitely the sworn duty of the commission to watch over that. And that's why we have a capacity committee, why we watch over what is coming in from out of compact, so that what is available space, there's still enough to make sure in compact generators have space for the waste that they are going to generate in the short term and in the near term future. Our capacity committee does that as an actor. Next slide. One of the things that Ryan talked about in his presentation that's relevant for us to go over in a little bit different light, we established rules, the commission did back in 2012, and last year we revised them related to a comment or a waiting day period for the commission will act on petitions to allow waste to either leave the state or leave the compact or enter the compact. The idea behind the rule was that the public should be allowed to provide comment on any waste coming into the compact, and the commission thought in 2012 that 35 days was the appropriate amount of time for there to be consideration for the public to comment, to say good or bad, whether the waste should come into and out. And we established a rule, and see on the screen, Texas Administrative Code 675.23, that establishes that 35-day waiting. So what we do practically is, if you apply and you do all the things that were listed earlier, we're going to put your import application up on the website and allow the public to review that 35 days before the commission acts. In the event that maybe the public actually comes up with a rationale or argument that the commission would want to say no and deny an application. We have the same one. Go back one slide. We also have one related to exporting waste. While that doesn't happen that often in Texas, that waste leaves the state of Texas or the state of Vermont to go to another site other than the compact waste facility, the decision was that we would change that and allow for only a 15-day period. It's not a readily occurring event that waste leaves the compact, but the 15-day waiting period was what the commission decided was the appropriate amount enough time for concession to allow that waste to come out of the state as well. But that's established in by rule in Texas Administrative Code 675.21, and that was just revised 2 years ago by the commission to shorten that waiting period 15 days because they thought that was adequate for a time period for the commission to hear public comment on whether they should allow this action. Next slide. This is a slide about forms that we have. Some of you may not have actually seen these forms, but we have a lot of forms on our website for the various ways for you to actually apply for the different things to do with the commission. The first one is the aforementioned importation form that Brian talked about. We have everything online that you can fill out an importation and submit it online to us so we get an electronic version of your actual application. It's pretty important that you be able to fill that out readily and not have to just fill out a hard copy paper. We've set that up. You can click on the link that's actually active whenever you get the slide deck, but it's an opportunity for you to see what the forms actually are. You see, we currently require that by rule that if you were going to apply to import waste into the state, that you actually provide a hard copy WCS, who is the facility operator of the disposal site, and the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, and obviously the commission itself, before you're allowed to actually be up for consideration. There was a discussion about whether we should actually amend that rule, and I think maybe I'd like to have that discussion today with you to remove the requirement that there be a hard copy of that import application and be able to submit it electronically. But to satisfy the notification, if you're going to apply with the commission to import waste, you need to make sure that WCS is actually notified that you're applying. They need to know that. You need to provide notification to them, and also you need to provide notification to the Commission on Environmental Quality that you're intending to import waste, so that the Commission on Environmental Quality can go through their certification review process and certify that your waste is actually eligible to actually be disposed of. That's a very important part of the process for what the commission does. So before they consider whether to allow your import application to be granted and the waste to come in, that TCEQ has said the waste can actually be disposed of at the site in the state. That is a critical part of the process. You'll notice on there we also have the form for irradiated hardware. I think I got talked about a lot earlier, but we often have irradiated hardware shipments that come in, usually control blades that come into the state, and they have very high purity content, sometimes significant volume as well. We have a separate process for irradiated hardware for the form to be filled out for you to bring that waste into the state. You have to fill out that form for us, so we know how much irradiated hardware you're sending in. Watch that, because I don't have it up here on the slide at the moment, but the Texas legislature set in place that only 275,000 curies may be disposed of per year in contact waste. And the commission takes an active role in making sure that we do not go past 275,000 being allowed in the state. That irradiated hardware form is there so we can track that. Those are large volume shipments of curies that come into the state, and it allows us to track in real time when those curies are coming into the state. Often, Mr. Charleston mentioned many times, import agreements will actually exceed that 275,000. The irradiated hardware shipment gives us a real-time process to make sure that we never go past that 270,000 curies that we granted on a contingent basis, which is what is mentioned. We'll talk about a little bit later in a different slide. But the curie, you can also see we have a curie policy paper that you can actually read. I won't go into detail about what that does, but it talks about why that is the policy in a little bit more detail than I just provided about why we limit irradiated hardware shipments. 15,000 curies, if you have irradiated hardware above 15,000 curies, or even if it's not irradiated hardware, actually shipping more than 15,000 curies, those are only granted as contingent agreements by the commission as a way to put a governor on that 275,000 curie limit that's set on a daily basis. And we can talk more about again, there's another a reference to the requirement that be provided. Talk about that. At the bottom, you'd also see, we have a generator authorization form that we did for generators to fill out, that can be helpful, to get your generator to authorize if you're allowed to ship to the state, and to show that you recognize the waste is being sent to WCS for disposal, and we have that available on the site too, so that's. Next slide. Some of this will be a little bit repetitive from what Ryan talked about, but I want to go over what is in an application, why it's in. These are the things, these are the questions that are asked in the form. Some of them are pretty self-explanatory. Who's actually applying? Who's the entity? Who's the person that's at the entity that actually is the contact point, right, for you filling out an application? I want to keep an email address for you so we can contact you electronically in response to your application. We have a phone number to call you in case we need to actually talk to you live and through a written communication, a website for your company. That way we can find out who you are in case I guess maybe we had a company that we didn't know who you were, right? I don't think that's ever happened before, but if you want to have a website, we can make sure you are who you say you are, which has come up in some other situations. We need a business address for you. That way we know where you're located, and a mailing address in case we need to mail you back, so we have a separate way of contact. Next slide. Another thing we ask for in that application is we need to know what kind of a generator you are. It's important for the different kinds of agreements that commission grants, actually. We first need to find out, are you a generator, right? Which that's usually the folks are that are importing waste in the state are generators. You could be a broker, be a licensed waste broker, which is a licensed waste process broker. You could be a collector, a broker, or it could be just a licensed waste collector. We also have Department of Defense, which occasionally actually ships the compact waste facility as well. But it's important for the commission to know what kind of importer you are, keep track of those things, and we give different agreements out based on what kind of an importer you are. And that last question we have on there is a question that we ask on the form. It's very important. The commission has set aside by rule, carved out for capacity for small quantity generators to make sure that we don't give all of the capacity of the commission that's available in compact waste. It goes just to large utilities, right, and power plants. We want to make sure there's a set aside for that, and we keep track of that. There's a set aside, and each year, and we track how much waste goes in the small quantity generator, and we need you to like to make sure that that's reserved for you. You need to identify yourself as a small quantity generator. Next slide. Per fiscal year, which is an important thing to note. I mentioned the Curie cap that is put in place, but we try and track with the state of Texas fiscal year that corresponds with that Curie cap. All of our agreements are designed to match up with that fiscal year. So it's a little bit off for some people because they would like to track the calendar year or maybe federal fiscal cycle. But we ask what kind of some people actually do want shorter agreements that don't match up the fiscal year. Some people actually ask for agreements that transverse the fiscal year, and the commission is their decision on that. But we do ask what agreement period you would ask for. You are applying. Slide. The next thing we're going to ask you is these are all I think listed in stuff that Ryan talked about earlier, but how much waste are you shipping to us? We need that measured in cubic feet. That's pretty important for us to know. How many curies are you shipping? We need to know that as well, and what your waste classification is. Is it A, B, or C waste? It's none of those. You don't need to ship to a compact waste facility. And we need to know whether it's in a stable or unstable form. That's also a pretty important point for us to go through. We also want to know if it's sealed sources. If you're shipping sealed sources, it's important for us to know as well, for our tracking purposes, what waste is coming into it out, and that way you're being upfront about what waste is there. We also want to know where it's coming from. I mean, that obviously needs to come from inside of the States. Can't be wasted in international origin, but we need to identify where this is actually coming from. Occasionally, that's actually a challenge. We ask everybody to list the states. As Brian mentioned earlier, some people like to list the compacts that the waste is coming from, and that is an acceptable description of your origin. But Brian is exactly right. Definitely better if you install the states, because sometimes what compacts are, or where the waste came from, and they add to it later. So is much better if you are upfront about all the different conditions. The description of your waste. It's pretty important for us to hear are you shipping debris? Are you shipping hardware? Are you shipping resin? You want specifics as to what waste you're shipping. It's very important for the commission to know what that is and to be as detailed and as inclusive as you can be. And we've had some challenges in the past where people have had sheet agreements and then they've had to add a different description of the waste because something they try to be as broad as you can with what waste you expect to ship. It's important. It may cost you some time, but a waste description that's inaccurate to ship or they ship. And the last, the current location, it's become important to the commission over the last few years. So I don't know where the waste is when you're actually applying. But it has the waste already shipped or has gathered the waste. Some people not, especially the waste processors. But it's important for us to honor forms of the compliance history. This has come up a few times. You need to answer questions as to whether you're compliant with TCEQ or any other regulatory entities. And we need to know a history of that. We need to know the accuracy of that. If you've actually got a poor compliance history, commission, that's relevant to the commission's decision that you can't hold. But we asked that question to hopefully get accurate information from you as to what that is. And we check it as well with TCQ and others to make sure it's compliant with that. These are all questions on the form that we fill out or decision. The certifications, which are somewhat similar to what we just talked about there with compliance history. These are all things that you need to certify to the commission before the commission wants to consider your application. Is the waste of international origin? If it's of international origin, you're not going to be able to ship. That's not allowed under the state of Texas that if the waste of international origin is disposed of a compact waste facility. We also have on there, is it compact waste? You have to certify that the waste actually came from the compact or out of the compact. That's important for you to tell the truth and certify that you have actually told that to us. And you can see at the bottom of the slide, it's a pretty important point. We need you to, if you don't check all those boxes that you certify all those things, you should deem your application complete. Otherwise, they don't want to consider your application. You can't actually provide information to us and provide a certification that all those things are accurate. Next slide. Well, we need somebody to actually sign on behalf of the company. Pretty important point. We don't want just anybody at the company or whoever the shipper is to sign, say we want to ship the waste. We want an authorized signature. One of the things we've actually added in the last year is an affidavit, which is an attestation that you are telling the truth in what's in your application, and that's to hold you accountable if somebody were actually fill out application inaccurate. You have to affidavit that you told the truth. It may not come into play, but it's important for the commission to have that happen. Past year, I believe that right. Yeah, that's been added to the application slide. I mentioned this earlier, but we had last year the current location of the waste. As we said, you know where it's at whenever you apply with us, and this affidavit of truthfulness report. Next slide. This is an important one for us to talk about. This compact commission doesn't actually have fees associated with waste into and out of compact. We receive an appropriation from Texas legislature that covers costs for what the commission does. So there are no fees, like other compacts. What was the second? That isn't the statute related to TQ fees and the grocery receipts tax. That is not actually. Those fees don't actually.
You're right, but they go to. It's not. They go through the same.
But we receive an
Right, who then gives us our appropriation.
Right, so we are paying for the compact commission through the fees that are collected.
Not
I
necessarily.
don't know if that's an absolutely accurate statement. I think there's been years when you probably have not collected as much as we've been appropriated through that.
We get appropriation through the general fund.
Well, no, I'll say this, by rule, the, the amount of the gross receipts tax that's dedicated, that's supposed to go for the operation of the compact waste facility is set by rule at TCQ. Of the legislature, our appropriation is not tied to that amount, they can use more, it's less than reflected, so the appropriation is set by the legislature, it's not tied to that. Next slide. Let's talk about what's in an agreement. So if the commission actually approves your application and votes to grant it to you, we give out an agreement to each successful applicant, and it's a contract actually. Some people don't do it that way, but it actually is. It's a contract between the applicant and the commission about how much waste you're allowed to ship, what waste you're allowed to ship, when you're allowed to ship, and it's subject to revocation. So if you don't comply with the terms in the agreement in your contract, commission can actually revoke or suspend the agreement and has actually done so. I think on more than one occasion. But it's important for it to be noted that it's actually between the two. The terms of those agreements are different, as we mentioned earlier about generators and brokers. A generator gets a different agreement than a broker does because the terms related to their activity and the collection of the waste, disposal of waste are a little bit different. But it's notable what those terms of agreement are, and the suspension and revocation is a real thing that has actually happened. Next slide. Talk about when an application is not needed. We've talked about that, but it's also important to note when you don't need one, actually, if you have radioactive material that's inside of the state of Texas or Vermont, you need to actually let us know about that. You need to let WCS know that you're shipping it to WCS, that you don't need an application to ship it inside of the compact. If it's sent to WCS for disposal, when you hear about it. And also, if there is very low level A waste, that is eligible for disposal at the record site. It's not subject to our current rules for importation into the state. So if one of the rec run is very low level A waste, you don't need an application from us as well. Next slide.
There we go.
There you go. One of the that we keep in place, waste comes from all across the country and from other compacts. And some of the terms in the agreement state that you need a conditional removal letter where you are actually allowed to import under the agreement that was granted to you. If it's coming from another compact that requires export authorization for waste to leave that compact, you will need to ask for and provide evidence that you have complied with those export authorizations, or the commission will give you additional. That will be in the terms of your agreement, and it's a way for us to enforce the compact rules from other compacts, not just our. That will be in the terms of your agreement if you are shipping from any of those areas or broker. Brokers obviously are collectors of waste from all across the country, and those are standards. You have to provide a written copy of that request for that conditional removal letter. Consider it. Make sure that you have done all that you can do, that you need to do to provide evidence of this or that, and then we'll issue a conditional. That's important to note. I know I have it on the slide, but it's important to point out to everybody. While the Northwest Compact does not have export authorization restriction, it's been the policy of the commission to make sure that you have received some approval from the Northwest Compact. The commission will allow waste to come out of this compact, despite the fact that they don't have export authorization restrictions. And as part of that conditional removal letter, we require everybody to provide the generators authorizations for all of the generators that they have, waste that they're disposing, especially if you're a broker or waste processor or collector, and that we review those and make sure everything in order with that. Also, like to that. So, talked earlier about the irradiated hardware and the Curie release process. As I mentioned earlier, and as you can see on the slide, the state of Texas restricts only 275,000 Curies to be allowed to be disposed of per compact per year. And the Curie release letter, as part of your agreement, is a way for the commission to regulate that. If you are going to ship 15,000 Curies as part of your agreement, you'll be subject to the Curie release process. I required you to notify us at least 15 days before you intend to ship those curies that you want to ship, and provide evidence of the time frame of that, what that is, the exact number of curies and the amount that you intend to ship. And the commission will review your application, make sure we certify we have a process in place. Chairman Hurley and Chair Saltzman and I make sure that we're under the 275,000 cap, and then a curie release letter will be granted to you. That 15 days is pretty important. It's a way for us to make sure that we're not going to go over that 275,000 limit. I don't think we've ever really got that close, but it's still a process that was established in place. As I mentioned earlier, often the commission will grant more than 275,000 curies through contingent agreements. This is a way for us to make sure that even though maybe 400,000 has actually gone out of agreements, you're never going to go up to next slide. This, I need to actually add to this slide, but if you want to change your agreement after it's already been granted, and this actually happened yesterday, where you make a decision that maybe you filled out your application, you didn't actually put enough cubic feet in volume for your agreement, or you didn't put enough curies available, or you had to add your waste stream or your description, or maybe even your waste classification form, but you need to amend your. There are two different amendment processes that the commission has in place. This slide is about minor amendments. So you need to change the origin of the waste, or the agreement period that's in your waste, or some other issue not related to the description of the volume periods of your waste. The commission has a minor amendment process that you can request your agreement be amended. Chairman Hurley and myself, the administration, will review it, and if the terms are okay, they will grant that minor amendment. The minor amendment does not require the major amendment would include need to add volume, need to add curies, to add waste stream, any major issue related to that. You will need to apply and go through the 35-day waiting period as well for the commission to actually vote. We do have the minor amendment process, and it is a good way to fix what the commission views as the issues that do not require the public comment period change. Next slide. Our last one.
Just to follow up briefly on something that Stephen said, because I want to make sure, especially generators in the room, know this. The contingent curie program was actually done for the benefit of generators and WCS, because what we found was, and we totally understood, that the rate hardware is very hard to measure in curies. So generators tend to kind of overshoot the mark, but they never end up using them. So what we found was that what Stephen described was we may have granted 400,000 curies on paper, but we never got near the 275. So the point of it was to ensure that we didn't have to stop accepting applications when we had 275 on paper. And the program, others may criticize it, but I think it's worked wonderfully. As a result, it's allowed us to go beyond the 275 on paper, but still allow others to come in and dispose of it. Kind of similarly, small quantity generators, some people question that, but the real policy behind small quantity generators is the idea that people who have smaller quantities are less sophisticated, don't have storage capabilities, don't have a process where they could find a place to put that waste for a period. And so we feel like we need to always have capacity for those people to have a place to quick dispose of their waste. And what I think it tends to be is things like academic institutions, medical institutions, people that do generate, but just don't generate in a high enough quantity to have the level of sophistication of some of you generators. The last thing, and this is really just kind of a generalized statement, one of the criticisms we get from some people is, why don't y'all ever deny an application? Why don't y'all ever, find fault with one and deny it? I think the answer to that is twofold, and it's really a brag on everybody in this room. One, I think both the generators and WC do their job well when it comes to applications. They don't bring stuff to us that have flaws. So to you generators and WCS, that's a thank you to you for actually for taking the process seriously and making sure that the waste you apply to dispose of is actually appropriate to dispose. The second answer is really a brag on staff and our vice chairman. There are applications that come in that have problems. Those are resolved. before they get to the point where they're brought up. And there has been numerous times when applications have been filed and we never consider them because they have a flaw. And rather than making a public spectacle of it, John will call them and say, you've got a problem. And if you can't resolve that problem, you shouldn't go forward. And so on occasion that does happen. So I think the point of that kind of in a general sense for what we're talking about is I have no doubt that this process can be improved. And I hope maybe part of the discussion this educational seminar starts is talking about improving that. But I do think the process works now. And I think it is exactly what it's supposed to be, which is a well thought out and safe process to ensure that the disposal happens as soon as possible, is done in a safe manner, and goes through all of the checks and balances that we think are important before we import waste into our state, which is obviously our job.
I would add one thing I didn't talk about earlier, but a short time period last year did have a process put in place to watch over real-time disposals to protect capacity. All the second cell was actually being built, make sure to reserve space. That's been suspended temporarily until it needs to be brought up again. But there was a process in place, watch over capacity, make sure there was capacity in currently constructed space in compact generators for the waste that they would have disposed. But that was suspended when the cell came online, but maybe brought back at a later time as capacity becomes maybe less limited. Certain.
Yes, about capacity. I just, want to say that we never been close to 275,000 curies a year. In fact, we're typically less than half of that.
Right.
Additionally, yes, by statute, we're not wild-eyed garbage people. By statute, we're required to stay within 270,000 curies. So even if, something was missed at the competition, which I don't expect would ever happen, but even if it was missed, we are obligated by statute to stay below 275,000. Never go. Yeah, the day-to-day calculation of what's coming in and what's in and so on. And so the risk of ever going over 275,000, right, is basically zero.
I would say also we acknowledge that the process that we have put in place is to make sure the commission is watching what's going on. It's just to make sure that doesn't happen on here so much that and it is watching over time, and that way there's what is your case.
Understand that. I believe we have very good understanding of what customers are shipping, and don't expect we would ever be in a position where we have waste somehow at our gates that's not fit into our annual allowance for the facility. Additionally, from a capacity standpoint, over 12 years, we about 4% of the capacity of the facility. So we can estimate there's about 200 years of capacity, volume capacity left in the facility, and relatively infinite curie capacity because of the K rate of the primary reading. 60, maybe 6, things that go away extremely quickly. You'll hit some level and then never go above it simply because the food happens. So I think certainly from a capacity, curies, and volume standpoint, not only watching very closely.
It's never a problem as we went saying smart off. Turn on so just so Dan, Brian, I think.
Go ahead, Brian. So I've got a question. So the last slide talking about your definition of environment. So I'm going to ask this question. So it talks about the change of origin. It's not related to volume, activity, or waste. So given that language, if a although waste class is very important, waste class is defined by the nuclei and the activity. So if I've got volume activity on the amendment is correct, couldn't I change the waste class minor amendment? It's really not that.
I would say the answer is no, because the statute is very specific the TCEQ must approve every waste that is coming in. And part of the approval of that is what is the waste class that is being requested in that import agreement. And if we're trying to,
What's the difference between C when it comes to A and C?
it's not our decision to make. It's TCEQ's decision. They are the sole arbiter of whether a waste stream is acceptable for disposal. Part of that decision process involves what's the class of the waste.
Probably change the conventional, that allows me to the latter amendment.
Well, actually, I mean, that's words on a page. That is never the way the committee has interpreted what a minor amendment is.
And just for clarity, the 275,000 only applies to.
Correct.
I think you may have said that once, but as it's being discussed, it almost sounds like it applies to in-compact waste.
No, that's correct.
But it does not.
That's correct. The legislature put that in place as a way to put a regulator on the amount of waste coming. Yeah, there is no theory cap on how much waste can come from in-compact all over the state. There's no regulator that I'm aware of.
And there is no volume cap on imported or in-compact.
All right, we've got a couple of questions online. Anonymous said, if we have a low-level radioactive waste that has decayed to a stable product, how do we determine if the decayed product meets any other hazardous waste requirements? What is the best resource for that? John, go ahead.
I think the answer to that would be that entity, the anonymous entity, should have a discussion with perhaps Department of State Health Services, depending upon the license that they have, or perhaps TCEQ to see if that material would still qualify as a low-level radioactive waste. But if that entity is out of the state of Texas, they need to have that discussion with their regulator, whatever that might be.
Okay, and then, well, I guess this is gonna back us up, but Brad Gibson from DPS said any commercial vehicle questions they have, he's happy to answer, and we can send out his contact info to everybody when they leave. Clint's statement goes to that discussion you wanted to have about changing the import application. He says they would like that.
That's probably a question for TCEQ. That is by rule set in place that you have to provide verification. So folks have asked if they can find what you got out of that. They think TCEQ finds it burdensome that they get a paper copy. It's somewhat burdensome on orders as well. You have to provide a copy. We'd like to have a discussion with y'all about how to change the rule as drafted so that an electronic version I think would be an acceptable for TCEQ and WCS. It's important to the commission. Like that once you apply for that, without something WCS ship ahead of time. And certainly the commission, you have to apply TCEQ and receive your certification. Commission that fair to say is not
We can't.
waste. If you have not received a TCEQ, it's eligible for disposal inside the state. So we'd like to make that less burdensome on import, but also satisfy our requirements and requirements of GC to WCS on the application process. Any feedback from y'all would be appreciated. I appreciate saying that. If y'all have any thoughts on that, I've talked to some of the folks at TCEQ and with the WCS folks as well. You might talk with Commission Chair's Chair Morris. She would be the one who'd like to hear how that would be revised.
Yes, the prohibition on international waste is a Texas prohibition. If Texas no longer had that prohibition, it'd still be a prohibition.
Probably have to do that.
Yeah, we would, obviously, we do not have a rule or anything in our statute that speaks to a prohibition against international waste. So if state law no longer supported that conclusion, I think we would then have to decide, do we want to pass our own rule about international waste, or would we then say, no, as long as the state of Texas is okay with it, we're okay.
The international restriction is in place because it's in the public safety.
Right.
And Dave, I think that would be also a bit of a political question, obviously.
No, I don't think it's ever going to change.
That becomes, do we go with the governor or do we not? I think is.
Right, it's, sometimes looking to where does the responsibilities of the state end and where the responsibility of the compact should begin and having if that overlap. Some things seem to be incumbent on the state of Texas, which is not a part of the state. of Texas.
Right.
Do you have any other questions?
Line, do you have any questions? I'm looking for hands raised. If anyone online has questions, go ahead and use the hand raise function and we will get to you.
So are we gonna take a break now, or do we wanna go into the,
We scheduled a 15-minute break, directly before your presentation. If y'all want to take another 15-minute break, that's right about on time, right? About 5 minutes after noon.
All right.
That's right.
All right, so we will take a break till 12:05. In that time, we'll mute it. If you need anything online, go ahead and email us at administration@TLLRWDCC.org.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Sorry that you've had to wait or slow your lunch down to wait for me, but I'll try to go through it relatively quickly and say plenty of questions at the end. So we're going to see. So we're going to talk about a whole list of things today: brokers, generators, information about who the generator is, talk a little bit about foreign waste or international waste, and some of the problems we see in the application. So next slide, please. So generator, there's a whole position paper the commission wrote about what a generator is and why that individual or entity would be a generator. But that's available on the website. And I know when you get the presentation, you can click on that link and it'll take you right to that position paper. What I want to talk about really is that the commission perspective on generators who beneficially last used the material before it was declared waste. And in this case, only interested in low-level radioactive waste, right? This doesn't apply to normal oil and gas, NARM, anything else. We're only talking about low-level radioactive waste. So the concept is a broker is typically not the last beneficial user, right? The material that there's in their possession waste in most cases, they didn't use that material. They had no beneficial use. A processor didn't beneficially use that material. It's who last beneficially used the material. Recyclers, again, they're not typically beneficial users, although we have on occasion had entities that do recycling of sources that in fact did use that source for some period of time, and then if it was no longer useful to them, they declared it waste, and in that case, we would allow a quote recycler to be the last beneficiary. What else? This is a little bit about the management rule, but again, material is radioactive material. It's radioactive material until somebody decides they don't need it anymore. It gets declared as waste. That change in description is when it takes place, who make a decision. Let's go to the next. Intermediaries, brokers. I made the point in the discussion this morning, our friends with WCS and our partners with TCEQ and DISHES were talking. The commission, when we put forth our rules in about 2012, we actually got some pushback about allowing brokers to apply for input. The reason we decided to allow that was because of the discussion we had this morning. It is complicated. You must be highly technical and you must have a lot of patience. You have to have a QA program. There are so many steps that it takes to be able to send waste to the WCS facility. Vast majority of radioactive material licensees do not have that wherewithal to do. So we wanted to create a way for individuals who had radioactive material they no longer wanted, that needed a safe place. We wanted to create a relatively easy path for them to get rid of those materials. And the way to do that is through, I've probably never actually looked at all the detail or the statistics, but when you look at the overall number of entities that ship waste to the WCS facility, by far the majority is through a broker. Because there are so many individual small generators that use a broker to send their waste to WCS, compared to the number of entities that actually apply permit that are a generator. So the idea of a broker was we want to get the waste, which is maybe in many cases a place where it really perhaps shouldn't be, is not necessarily safe or secure. We want to get WCS where it is safe, secure, and disposed. There are other entities besides brokers, and let's go to the slide. Recycle, processing, storage, recyclers take sources. Many times they may use those sources, or again, they're looking for a new home for that source. Sometimes they find a home, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they have to prepare that material waste. Waste processors, they are occasionally considered to be a waste generator, particularly waste processors that are in the state of Tennessee. When they take material in by Tennessee law, they are required to become the generator of that material once it's actually shipped waste. Brokers, or sorry, the processors in Tennessee are sort of in that situation. I know that law exists in other states. Storage, WCS provides storage, but there are other entities in Texas and outside of Texas that provide storage, and that could be a beneficial situation for many entities that generate slides. We talked a little bit about this, but when we ask this question about if you self-generate waste, particularly for brokers and processors, what we are trying to understand is, it's back to the question of beneficial use. Is the material that you want to send waste, was it something that you beneficially used with radioactive material, or are you just processing? If you are just processing or just handling, probably wasn't a beneficial use. So we had a problem a few years ago with an entity that was doing some processing, and they were brokering, and they were indicating the waste was theirs when in fact it probably was actually a less beneficial use of someone else. So this question that we ask, and the reason we want details about that, so that we can help ensure who beneficially used that material and who actually generated it, who possessed it. It's important so that when the material goes underground at WCS, there is a record of who all the entities are actually including material shipping from a processor plant. We have occasionally had to ask follow-up questions of a broker or processor when they indicate they are self-generating waste. I mean, we'll take your explanation at face value. And it does happen that a broker or processor does beneficially use material to create waste. So it's allowed. We just want to understand the process. A little bit about export. Generally speaking, these waste streams, liquid, scintillation cocktails, animal carcasses, in the past, WCS has not opposed to exported, though I do think WCS has some capability to process those materials if they so chose.
Yeah, that was great.
But these materials in the past have been exported. But again, it's really a financial decision discussion. Yes, next slide. Foreign material. There was a little discussion about this. I want to start out by saying the commission looks at this very carefully, and there have been previous import applications where we have denied certain materials because the entity could not prove to our satisfaction material wasn't of international origin. I don't remember them. Probably remember the name. Don't call them out. It was a California company, and I believe they were going out of business, and they were trying to get rid of lots of material, lots of sources. Some of the sources they could clearly show a pedigree where they had taken the source in, who it came from. It was a U.S. entity who accepted those materials. There were some of those sources, though, that the information that they were able to provide us made it appear that that source actually came from foreign entity. and they took it directly from an entity. They were acting as a broker and they wanted to dispose of it. And the answer was no. We believe that material would violate the prohibition in Texas law, and so we said no, won't accept those materials. But the important in this is this question of where did the source come from? Well, really, we look at it from a last beneficial user perspective. For many of you who've been in the industry a long time, there's something called Amersham, and they produced probably hundreds of thousands of sources over the years. Amersham was located in Great Britain. But there are many, many entities in the United States that bought sources that were manufactured by Amersham, they brought them to the United States, and they used them beneficially for years, decades. But at some point, those sources are no longer useful and they need to be disposed of as waste. The commission is not concerned where that source was originally. What we are concerned about is who last beneficially used that source. And if it was a U.S. entity, then we consider that material to not be of foreign origin and it is acceptable for disposal at the WCS site, assuming it meets all the other criteria. It has to pass through WCS and they have to do your program, QA, and it has to be approved by TCQ disposal and all those kinds of things. But again, just because a source was manufactured overseas does not prohibit it from being disposed of. Yes, sir.
So this is a nuance here, but I think it's important. So if you have perhaps a U.S. entity that has an item, maybe it's a source, maybe it's some other piece of equipment, and it was used for the best internationally, and the last place it was used for shipped back to its owner was internationally, does that make it a?
I do not believe it does, because that entity, it has to be a United States entity, right? Can't be an entity that is their office in France, right? If it's a United States entity, let's say Baker Tool in Houston, Texas, just because they used a source in the United States, they used it over in Europe, Africa, wherever. Baker Tool is a United States entity, and they are a corporation here or some sort of company or something like that, then I believe that material is eligible for disposal. Yes, facility. It's not an
Baker or something like that is
they are,
but
they are a United States company.
So it's where their headquarters exists that really drives on this.
I would.
I think there's a lot of nuance around this.
I do too, and we look at those decisions on an individual basis, right? We don't, there are blanket statements, but I believe if it is a United States company, then the material that they generate is likely considered United States waste, or I should say waste that is not international.
And I think the real reason for that is the regulatory authority that the federal government and state government have over those domestic entities, as opposed to someone who is international in origin, who may not fall into the jurisdiction of the NRC or one of our local state agencies. So if a company that is based in Houston brings in something they've used internationally, they still fall under the regulatory authority of NRC and TCQ and others. So we know that they can be held responsible and will comply with those regulatory authorities' standards. The international companies may not. I think that's the point.
And I believe that's
the health and safety goal, from my perspective, would be not to orphan items in the U.S. if we can avoid it.
correct. And I think that's another aspect of it. We don't want a U.S. company to have waste that is orphaned, that they have it, they can't get rid of. I don't think that serves a health and safety. So,
Right, so wouldn't we have something that's, we need to call it gray area, but it's one that needs discussion in order to clearly, how do we go about, documenting that decision
I think that becomes a decision starting with Stephen, and then he can just reach out to other division as necessary. We'll have a discussion. We've had to do that with the company in California, which again, the paperwork they had, it seemed pretty clear to us. They just took that source, I think actually it was from Mexico, from a company in Mexico. They just took it directly and then they wanted to dispose of it. But there was another entity, I don't recall the name at the time, had similar issues where we looked at individual sources in the paperwork. They had individual source and made a decision. So I think we're willing to have a discussion about how we can get to a successful decision that doesn't orphan waste, unless it's clearly.
And it may take an analysis as well as to whether or not whatever that the path of that waste is complies with state and federal law too, because there are some NRC regs, there's some federal laws that could all impact whether or not that source, when it's been brought into the country, has been brought in correctly.
Sure, it could be under US ownership, it could. You know, again, it could have no pathway back to another country. And, okay, we're saying, you know,
I
sit there.
I ultimately though, we are held to the legislation in the state of Texas, which says we cannot take waste in. And we can't violate that unless the law changes.
Right, but there's a lot of open space in that statement. And like you said, the Amersham sources that were by US companies used here and so on. So, yeah, so I agree the statute says what it says. I don't think that's been tightly defined legally.
Probably has not. I know the NRC has a position on this, and I think generally our position is aligned with theirs, which is similar about they are not simply about where the source was actually manufactured, but really who was using that source when it became.
Right, to me, it's almost clean. You have to internationally collect a lot of sources, bring it here, which is completely prohibited. Or it's sitting in the US, in the US. Is there an appropriate pathway to?
I think we discussed.
That source, let's say manufacturing Europe, sold the United States, using Japan. Life. That's not an actual.
Is the company in the United States going
States.
by definition, Department of Energy and Materials.
I understand, I use that as the.
But DOD could have a similar situation, and I think by definition, material that is owned by the United States government is US material, by definition.
Second to last one.
Yes. I must have thought of that already.
And I believe we have taken that kind of waste.
We absolutely have.
Mhm.
And I can tell you, I've had discussions with DOD, either directly or contractors, where occasionally DOD comes into possession of radioactive materials. Once they come into their possession and they take ownership, those are United States materials.
And so the word generated there probably something different too. So if the US government, say the US military collected up sources in order to falling into inappropriate hands, even though they didn't use it beneficially.
If the United States government takes possession of material, that by definition makes it United States material. Next slide.
Sorry to beat that one up.
No, that's okay. That's the nature of the discussion. Just a quick item here, kind of a plug, if you will. Department of Energy has a couple of programs to help entities to get rid of sources and particularly for sealed sources. OSRP typically is involved with taking very large, very high activity source. I say large, high activity source. Those probably really don't come to the WCS site because they in fact don't meet the 10 CFR 61 waste classification criteria. But under the scatter program, a similar kind of program for lower activity sources, It's administered through CRCPE. Brokers get involved, but it's a way for small entities, unsophisticated entities, to get rid of radioactive sources that they no longer want. In most cases, it's a way for them, at a discounted price, if you will. That's either the scatter program, or one case, actually the Southeast Compact paid for the cost of it. Next slide. NRC 540 forms, we get copies of those, or we sometimes request them. Again, we sometimes have to dig into the details about who the generator was, who's the last beneficial user. Those forms have a lot of very detailed information on them and help assist the commission with determinations. Next slide. So, top 5 errors. The very top one is, gosh, I'd say maybe 30% of the import applications we receive, people, I don't know if they accidentally check this box, or if they check it, they don't know what it means. I've had nuclear power facilities check that box many times. Clearly, they are sophisticated and they are never considered a small quantity generator. But we don't, if somebody accidentally checks the box, we don't say, okay, well, we're filling your application out. We clarify with them. We receive it. We clarify, yeah, you're probably not going to qualify as a small quantity generator, but we will still consider your application. Origin of the waste, again, that's an issue where people don't tell us where that waste is at or where it came from. That's very important. Had a discussion a few minutes ago about waste streams and people, you start a waste campaign, maybe at a nuclear power facility, or maybe it's a facility that's going through D&D. They don't know all the waste streams, or they forget one. That's pretty common. Errors in waste volume and radioactivity. I can't count the number of times I've seen somebody put a decimal point in the wrong place on either their waste volume or the radioactivity. Is actually more common than imagine. And then again, where's the waste? Where's the location of the waste? That was more common now. It didn't used to be common. Slide. Thankfully, we are to the end. I am happy to answer any questions that I know Linda and Stephen as well. So any questions from in the house or online?
We don't have anything online, but everyone, if you have anything online, please use the raise hand function and or go ahead and type a question in the chat.
Yes, sir.
I just want to revisit the comment made about state of Tennessee and environment processor. I'm not sure I understand processors. Tennessee approximately HG excluding being generated. That's the waste can be attributed generally as all waste that's been incinerated or somehow not able to be uncommitted.
I believe, and if I didn't add that caveat, I should have. For waste that is in Tennessee, once it is commingled, then I believe the Tennessee law is such that those processors are required to become the generator of that material. But again, I think I'm not saying every processor. If you said your waste there and you're the only person who is in that waste stream, then I would say it would go back. Yes, sir.
An interesting thing, Dan, I agree with Dan, because his name is Dan.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they don't have to, they can attribute it to themselves if it's unrecognizable. The compacts don't have to accept it. This, I'm not saying that's anything you need to worry about. Something that Energy Solutions had to deal with. That even though it was attributed to a processor, compact in the state did not have to accept it. Also in part, it's an F agreeable state that's going to. So I thought that was an interesting little twist, and it was specifically used to ensure that waste from international origin not being sent to different. So.
Thank you for the note. That's,
Yeah,
that's
it's-
good to be aware of.
They used the 542 form, and it all had to be listed out. Who was the original user? So my question is, if you get some rocks to work. That's not international.
Hey, wait,
Sit in our plant here.
hey, someday it can happen.
A lot of these are real scenarios. So
I know.
So I go, TSHS may have a user facility, they're a license that has certain materials. TSHS would look at it and say, okay, these are not of international origin. They're in Texas and I don't want to orbit here. But the compact may look at that differently and say, no, stuck with that, TSHS. What's the mechanism to resolve?
Well, I think we would have conversation issues to understand the information that they have, why they made the decision they made. You know what? I'm sure if something like that were to come up, they would be basing that on information. So we would want to make sure we had the same information.
But they may see it differently.
It is possible.
Differently. So I guess who's the final arbiter? Is it you or is it?
That sounds like a legal question. I'm not a lawyer. We may, absolutely. But we have plenty of attorneys in Texas that I'm sure could resolve that.
Have some answer.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
I wanted to mention one other thing, just, it's been probably 5 years since I've been out at all. This is a lot more fun. 10 years. Shane and I will not agree. One of the things I do think the commission really should take credit for what you talk about. Being responsive to, protecting, being outset of this commission. There's a little factor, like, comes to Texas General. Texas to the compact. So, the amount of carries from small quantity is higher. So it's, so according to my numbers. First thing prepared. Based on small.
I believe the first shipment was from Bio. So,
That was crap. Yeah.
But it brings up an important point about the real world perspective of we all need our x-rays for our teeth. And we all need, there is a lot of small quantity generators out there that serve a vital function in our society. So we need to make sure they can dispose of their waste so they don't get to a point where they say, sorry, we can't do these vital functions anymore because we don't want to generate the waste.
Out of contact. Yeah, so you guys do need to.
thank you. It was not lost on the commission early on that for wanting to dispose of waste efficiently, effectively, and properly, self-safe, and WCS facility serves a vital function for the United States, not the state of Texas, not the state of Vermont, for the United States. And when you look at the waste that is generated in many cases by small quantity generators, there would not be a home for much of that material in the WCS facility. So it's vitally important, and they always keep that path available.
And again, if you're not sure if you are, the definition is in two places. In 0.20 definition, it's also in 0.25 and 675.25, which talks about material science.
We have comment. Question as well. Kenyon.
You're going to speak up, Stephen.
Says, waste generator breakdown, 542 manifest in the process of the broker going to Barnwell and Clive or transferred to DOE minutes. It is my understanding that 542 form is generator breakdown to WCS is not provided. Providing such breakdown is a cost issue for CS. Can the compacts request DOE and DOGE provide funding to get the breakdown? And this will provide transparency.
I won't try to, I'll say, that's a great comment.
And I think from the commission's perspective, I don't know that we have any standing to go request funding from the DOE for something that we aren't necessarily involved with. So, but I think anybody who's an impacted party probably ask that of the federal agencies to provide funding.
I think those questions is cost the issue. A fair question.
Other comments?
Oh, I was gonna say one about the typographical error, because it kind of dovetails back to one of the questions Ryan had about the minor amendment. We have been asked before, hey, listen, I put down 30 cubic feet, but I meant 3,000. Can't we just do that by minor amendment? And the answer to that emphatically is no, because that is a change in volume. Same thing with curies. And our policy behind that is that because obviously we have guiding rules that impact us carefully watching curies and volume, we believe that's always something that should come before the entire commission and not be done on an expedited or informal basis like the minor amendments.
Has another comment, I think probably informative, talks about it. Mr. Chairman, said it's my understanding that the Tennessee rule enables thermal residue processor fits. It does not require it. So, Berlin facility, when it operated by Studsvik, provided 542 breakdowns as a residue shipping product. Barnwell blocked information states. Studsvik petitioned to call the residue there to.
Okay.
History.
All right. That's it. On behalf of the commission, I want to thank everyone for your presence today, both online and here in Austin. I apologize, weather is not so great today, but we thank you all. I hope you found this informative. If you do have comments or questions, please send them later today or tomorrow day. He will get the presentation sent out to everybody, so we'll have that available. And again, we encourage any feedback, and we will do this again in the future. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Those of you online, I'll try and get a list of who's online, but if you want to get an email copy, I will put these up on the website next week. But if you want an email copy, please email me or email administration and we to you. You can wait to go online.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Everybody take a piece of candy.